I'm getting used to this combination of giant traps and boobs over here. I find myself occasionally staring at your boobs. I'm like, this is getting to be a little different for me.
I'm just
Making
happy
you
that
blush.
Well, y'all have known each other for decades, so whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just happy that I finally have some, even as small as they are. So they're that's been, honestly, it's, for me, that's something that feels normal, and something like when I see my body and see that changing, it's something that finally feels right to me. It feels like something that always should have been, and it has never been.
Take a long time to like grow them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, so when someone starts hormones or, hormone replacement therapy, where either they're suppressing the testosterone production or removing it by usually an orchiectomy, which is removal of the testes. By doing that and then adding estrogen, you basically go through a female puberty. So they take just as long to grow as like a girl when she goes through puberty.
Yeah.
So typically several years. I mean, everyone's a little different. Some people respond quickly, some take longer. And again, a lot depends on genetics. If the women in your family are big-breasted, likely you will be too. And if they're not, which mine mostly aren't, so I'm gonna have to work a little harder. And but it's something that definitely feels really nice and just feels like right. I mean, that's probably the best way to describe it. It feels like that's how it was always supposed to be. And now that that's happening, it's something that makes me really happy.
I think some girls get a little weird about training their chest. Have you gone through that yet?
There's the funny thing is, it's like, it's more like, the funny, like things like jujitsu, rolling, and they're just getting enough where some of my friends, and we're really close and very open with each other, and there's pretty much nothing that's like TMI or nothing that's off limits. And a couple of times now, a couple of my friends have been rolling, and they'll grab my chest or post on me or whatever. And afterwards they'll be like, sorry for grabbing your boobs. And they're like, yeah, they feel like boobs now. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, so that, to me, that's like, okay, great. But it's also a little awkward. And, but my pecs are still large, so they kind of blend in. It's not as obvious. They feel, I think, more like boobs than they look like boobs, but they're getting there.
Yeah. Quickly rewinding to what you were mentioning, because like you obviously, when it comes to jiu-jitsu, you want to compete. So it's not like you just want to do jiu-jitsu casually. You want to compete. So for you, having been an athlete and you're still an athlete, you want to really push your athletic prowess and what your body can do. But then there's also the side of things where you also want to take these hormones so that you can pass better over time. How are you currently trying to deal with that?
That's been an ongoing challenge. Unfortunately, people, the easiest way to, from an athlete's perspective, the easiest way to think about estrogen therapy is basically anti-steroids. So everything that androgens do as far as gaining muscle mass, increasing strength, increasing performance, lowering body fat, estrogen does exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
It drives nutrients towards storing more body fat, decreasing muscle mass, and generally decreases performance in just about every metric. So as an athlete, that's been very difficult. And for me, especially someone like for jujitsu, I mean, there's lots of hobbyists, right? That just enjoy the sport for the sport, love to practice. That's all they want to do. They have no interest in competing, and that's totally fine. Whatever makes you happy. But for someone like me, the whole reason I enjoy it is competition. And the whole point of competition is to win. And no, granted, like I lost plenty of matches, and I'm sure I'll lose plenty more. And that's totally fine. It's all part of the process. But for me, it's about getting better. It's about evolving. It's about changing and being a better competitor. And that's what I find satisfying, that challenge and that growth and constantly striving to do better and better. And without competition, that would really take away all the enjoyment for me in doing jiu-jitsu at all.
What are some of your thoughts on trans athletes, in your position competing, I guess, against females, especially in something like contact sports?
Yeah, so it's a very complicated topic. There's not a one answer fits all. I think it's something we still need a lot more research on. I've actually spoken at length with Joanna Harper, who is one of the researchers that has consulted with the IOC based on their rulings with trans athletes. And we have a few small studies, but we don't have any large long-term studies on trans athletes. Up until recently, there hadn't been any trans athletes that had really had much of any success, and now we've had a couple. We've had the swimmer Leah Thomas, and we've had CeCe Telfer, who won the 400-meter hurdles in Division II in college. part of the problem that makes this all really murky is trans people have become so politicized, and that conservatives generally take the view that everything trans is bad, and liberals, everything trans is good.
Yeah.
And I don't like to generalize, but that's kind of where we're at, and how everything in our culture has polarized so much. And I hate to see that a group of people have been drug into this and turned as a weapon for sides to use against each other. The reality is most trans athletes have had very little success, and typically their performance does decrease enough to where they're on an equal playing field with most other women. The success trans athletes have had has been greatly exaggerated and distorted. And I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. The Olympic weightlifter Laurel Hubbard, I don't know if you're familiar with her. So if you were to listen to a lot of people, they'll tell you about how Laurel, won world championships and smashed all this, records, and that just was dominating women, and that had she not bombed out of the Olympics, she would have crushed everybody. Well, none of that's true. The only championships she's won, she did win women's master worlds, and which obviously is older athletes and not as, you don't have the best competitors there. And then she won the Pacific Games, which is not a real high level competition. The strongest countries aren't represented there. The best that she has ever placed at the Open World Championships against the best women was 6th. And she hit PRs across the board there and had by far her best competition ever. And she was still 6th place, and that was much higher than she was projected to finish. So the reality is, has she done well? Yes. Is she a threat to any of the top women? Not at all. Like any people in the sport that really know the sport will tell you she had no chance at medaling at all. At the World Championships, she was, I want to say, like 200 pounds out of first place and over 100 pounds out of the medals. So even on her best day, on her best performances, if all the other best women are there and lift to their capabilities, she has no chance of medaling. The only way she could medal is if the other women were absent, they bombed out or got injured, and she just happened to be and had her best day ever and basically got lucky. But against all the best women in the world, she's not a top 3 placer, and she's nowhere near the world records.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you get to, thinking about like who would win, and like maybe this person potentially took a spot away. Yeah. That's what people will kind of whine about in some degree. One of the things I just find interesting, and I don't have any idea what's right or wrong, but just imagine if an athlete was in a race and they were like really fucking good, and they almost made you run a much faster race than normal. Let's say it was a female versus a guy. But let's say the female got her best time ever. It's like, does she no longer care about that because she kind of came in second, or are we after those PRs?
You raise a good point too with that. Like, let's say there were no gender divisions at all. Like, jump on a different track here for a second. I have a feeling we would see women's performances increase substantially, just being forced to compete at a higher level of competition. And that generally happens wherever we see it. It's like with world records. I feel like so much of this is psychological as much as it is
how
physiological.
Women have gotten in powerlifting.
Exactly.
Because they started to be more, there was more women in powerlifting gyms, and they just thought it was normal. They saw their buddies, squatting 315 and 405, and so they started squatting that way.
Changed their whole perspective on what was strong for a woman, or what was strong, period. And it's like I would tell competitors in the same way, like, people, if you're the strongest person in your gym, go to a different gym. If go to a high level competition, go to nationals, go to worlds, watch people move these weights. It changes your perspective. And it's just like when records are broken. The 1,000-pound deadlift didn't get broken forever, but then once it did, boom, you had several other people that broke it right away. The same thing with the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was deemed impossible for the longest time. Roger Bannister breaks it, boom, then there's a handful of other people running sub 4-minute miles. Now we have high school kids doing it. And I think this partially with female athletes, part of the problem was low expectations. There was also a lot of pressure on women, especially you'd see it in high school, where girls purposely aren't trying hard because of negative social consequences.
Power Project family, how's it going? So no matter what diet you're on, or no matter what supplements you take, it's necessary as you get older to know what's going on under the hood. That's why I've partnered with Merrick Health. They're the premium telehealth clinic owned by Derek from More Plates, More Dates. And we have a panel that will allow you to get all of your labs done and checked in a super easy fashion. Andrew Andrew, how can they get it?
Yeah, you guys got to head over to MarekHealth.com/powerproject. That's MAREK health.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save $101 off of this comprehensive panel. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes.
Like guys, some of the guys, maybe they're interested and don't want to date a girl who's faster than they are or, is successful in athletics. You'll see girls downplaying their own ability because of these social pressures. I think that's happening less and less as it's more normal for girls to be lifting weights now at a young age. It's more accepted for women to strive harder and work harder and be competitive, where in the past that was more frowned upon. And now I'm not saying that. Going back to trans athletes, I don't want to say that it's all, there's not a physiological basis, because there absolutely is. And I don't want to say I'm not someone who believes that testosterone levels don't matter, because they absolutely do. And anyone who's been in powerlifting or any sports where androgens are used, they obviously make a difference. And that's not deniable. But what we don't know is we do know that taking away androgens and replacing them in a body with estrogens, no matter who that is going to substantially affect performance, and it's going to substantially decrease it. Now, the question, of course, is does it decrease it to a level low enough where that now they're on an even playing field with other women? Now, it does appear that if this is done during puberty or before someone actually goes through a male puberty, most likely, yes, they're never going to have those advantages. And so that's something that's never going to have to be addressed later on, and their performance isn't going to be at that much of a higher level. Now, with people that have fully matured as a male, and especially someone in my case that has taken additional androgens and, years and years of that, then taking all that away and going on estrogen, is that going to decrease their performance enough? It decreased my performance substantially, a huge amount. And to the point where I bailed on it because as an athlete, it was hurting my performance too much. And I'm still, for the people who don't know, I'm still on an estrogen implant, and my estrogen levels are actually above a typical female's. But then we've been experimenting with SARMs and a few other very low androgenic androgens, trying to balance out some of my performance losses and fat gain.
You also didn't have any gender surgeries except for vocal cords or something like that.
No,
right?
I've had actually a handful. I've had vocal feminization surgery, which has helped, but I'd still like my voice to be higher in pitch. But I've had, vocal feminization surgery. I've had 2 facial feminization surgeries, which have made a huge difference for me. And to be honest, I was kind of nervous about those. It's your face. And I'm how am I going to look? And you see bad results, bad plastic surgeries, and you're like, oh my gosh, what if that happened? But I'm ecstatic with those surgeries. More than anything, they've helped me feel comfortable in my own skin. So that's been a huge thing. I've also had, obviously laser hair removal. I had a hair transplant early on to try to combat my hair thinning, but it didn't do enough where I can grow my own hair out. So now I still have to wear wigs. I've also had, what else? Vocal feminization, facial feminization. I had orchiectomy as well. So I lost one testicle to cancer early on. And then way back in 2004, and then I had the other one removed, which is referred to as an orchiectomy. So my body no longer produces, the only androgens my body produces is a small amount we produce from the adrenal glands. So I actually make less testosterone than most other women. And that's been a really good thing for me. But yeah, like I said, with the balancing the feminization and performance as an athlete has been the trickiest thing.
But you still have the main male part.
I do for now.
And what does that mean to you? Does that do you feel like you're female by all means, or because you still have?
It's the thing is, I'll say this is very individualized. I'd say the majority of trans women do want to have bottom surgery, but not everybody. There are a lot of risks with the surgery. It is very complicated surgery that often has complications are fairly typical. There's the chance of losing sensation. There's a chance of, I know, when you're creating the neo-vagina, there's one of the risks is that they accidentally nick the colon, and that's obviously can cause, serious infections. And I do know of some girls that end up with colostomy bags after that, and some life-threatening infections that were really really, really serious. And then like for me, if I could snap my fingers and if you said, hey, you can trade that in for a vagina tomorrow and everything's gonna be perfect, boom, it's done. Like I don't even have to think about it. Like absolutely 100%.
Can trade that in for a vagina.
Yeah. And
I got a lot of things I'd trade in.
Yeah. But of course it's not that simple and it's not that easy. And my biggest concern is, I mean, I've been researching this for a couple decades and all the surgeons and, you know, who has the best results and it's not an easy thing to figure out. And you talk to all these other girls that have already gone through it and hear all their experiences. And while most of them are really positive, there are some that have had a really rough time and things haven't gone the way they wanted them to. And of course, every time you have a surgery, every time you go under anesthesia, there's a risk. I've had 9 surgeries at this point in my life. And I don't really want to jump back in to sign up for more. Plus the recovery process is difficult. Like I would have to take probably, I know they'd recommend I probably take like 6 months off jiu-jitsu. I don't know that I would be able to do that. I'm the type of person, like after I torn off both biceps and had them reattached, after the first one, I was back in the gym 2 days after surgery training with one arm. And I think if anybody followed my career, I think they'll remember me posting some videos and some people thought it was awesome. Some people thought I was an idiot. And then my second bicep surgery, I literally cut the cast off after 5 days and started working it. I mean, I don't recommend anyone else does those things, but for me, it did help me recover a lot faster. And in the end, worked out really well. But yeah, part of it, like basically putting all the things I enjoy on hold for a long period of time. The risk with the surgery, one of my biggest fears is that I am someone who has a strong sex drive, and there is a small risk of losing sensation down there and not being able to achieve orgasm. For me, that would be a huge impact on the quality of my life.
Yeah.
So that's a concern for me. And like I said, if magically we could swap it out and just snap your fingers, it'd be a done deal. And I do plan to have it done at some point. I think I want to get my body further towards the feminine end of the spectrum before I do that, but probably within the next couple of years. I mean, it's something I absolutely want, but it's just trying to minimize the risk as much as possible. And then you're always kind of holding out, like, is there going to be a new surgery coming out? Is there a better technique that someone's going to discover? But I don't see anything on the horizon that looks substantially different than what they're doing now. But it's also very expensive. I mean, just on the surgeries I've had, I've spent over $100,000 out of my own pocket. Almost none of it's covered by insurance. Now we're starting to see a lot more insurances that do cover the gender confirmation, the bottom surgery. But like most things like breast implants or even laser hair removal or any other steps most of the girls have to go through, almost none of that's covered. There's a few rare insurances out there that do, but most do not.
Hey, baby. I'm joking. Guys, like, comment, subscribe, and head to the Power Project Discord, all right? I know you enjoyed the video. Speak to y'all soon.